Okay, so I'm going to take you through the very, very basics of how to use Mudbox. I am using a mouse. You usually, when you're sculpting, use a tablet and a pen. But there's quick start guides up here. 1-minute videos will show you how to use it with a mouse and how to use it with a tablet. So I won't go through those. You can watch those. So I'm going to start. I'm just going to grab just the standard plane so that we can play around with it. I've got my controls at the minute set to Maya, I think, or set to Mudbox, I should say. If you are using a mouse and you want to change it to your standard 3D Studio Max tools that you're used to, go to Windows up here and click Hotkeys. It'll open up this dialog, and in there you can choose different software types. I don't know who uses Softimage, and I don't know anyone who uses it anymore. 3ds Max, you can change it there, and then your rotation in terms of middle mouse and Alt will allow you to rotate, and it uses 3ds Max's tools. Right, so what we've got here is a standard plane. If I press W on the keyboard is wireframe, and you can see how many polys it's using. And then down on the bottom down here, you've got sculpting tools, and then a tab for painting tools, a tab for curves, posing, and then select and moving. So this select and move basically allows you to move whatever it is that you've got in your scene, select it and move it around. When you're moving around in Mudbox natively, you're not moving your object at any time. You're always only moving the camera. So we'll start on sculpt. So these brushes along here, they are numbers 1 to 9 on your keyboard, and any that are past that, then you have to just go and find them by sliding along. So it tends to be the ones that you use least seem to be over on this side anyway. The ones that you use most are over on this side. So sculpt, you'll use a hell of a lot. Smooth, you will use just as much as you do sculpt. And then grab and pinch are also two really good useful tools. So straight off the bat, any of the tools that you have active, so if I click on smooth or click on sculpt, you'll see over here on the right hand side that the properties change. So I've got sculpt selected at the minute, and I can see I can change the size of my brush. So you can see the circle that I've got on the screen at the minute. That will change if I change the size of the brush here. The strength, how much that brush affects the ground when you're painting, is based on the strength. Then you can turn a mirror on as well, which means whatever I do on one side, it will do on the other. Useful for when we're doing head sculpts, because you can do them symmetrically, and then later on you can make them asymmetrical if you want a bit more sort of character in your design. Invert selection, obviously it allows you to sculpt inwards as opposed to outwards. There are shortcut keys for all of these I'll go through in a second. Stamps, these are used if you want to put any sort of detail on your mesh. I probably haven't got enough subdivisions on here. No, I haven't. But it's painting this, basically, this little sort of flower, because I haven't got enough polygons, you can't see it. But we'll go into stamps a bit more in detail later. Stamp spacing is basically, so if I were to draw a straight line from here to here, it will stamp that image as I draw along in sort of spacing, and I can change whether that's further or closer. Snap to curve, so if you have a curve, which we don't at the moment, but if we did, so if we had a curve on our plane like this, and then we wanted to sculpt to it, you see that my mouse pointer just snaps to the curve, so that when I'm drawing, it will draw and follow that curve. Okay, so you can go in and really sort of detail curves as well. You can grab it and move it and position it. So open and close brackets, the square ones on the keyboard will increase or decrease the size of your brush. So yeah, you could get this looking perfectly around your character. So if they were wearing, I don't know, some kind of belt or something that you wanted to kind of flow and droop down from their shoulder or something, you could use a curve to get it perfectly where you wanted it, and then go in and sculpt to make sure the sculpting was perfect as well. So that's how they work. I'm going to erase that curve if needed. Steady stroke is really nice. Again, it's almost like the curve thing, but you can freehand it. So with steady stroke turned on, if I click and start dragging, you see I now have got a little line on the end, which gets lighter green the more I get towards the end of it. Once I get to the end of that line, that's when I start drawing it, and it's almost like a nice, super smooth, line. Basically, it allows you to smooth things up. Steady stroking. similar to is it Paint Tool Sai, that has its own sort of smoothness on its brushes. Kind of helps you do something similar to that. So that's steady stroke. Reset, just reset your brush. I don't actually know what flood does. I've never used it. Advanced here. So remember, size means that if you go into smooth and use a brush and then you go back to sculpt, it remembers the size that I had sculpt on. That's it, essentially. Some people really like it, other people don't. Some people like the brush to stay the same size regardless of what tool they're in. If that's you, then just make sure you turn that off. Orient to surface. I can't really show you on a flat plane. I'll just quickly open. So yeah. So orient to surface obviously allows the mouse to rotate and stay attached to the surface of the object, as opposed to just flat. Okay. So you probably want that on most of the time. Minimum pressure and maximum pressure is to do with your pen. So if you're using a Wacom, then here, if you're finding that your brush strokes are being really, really heavy or they're not really doing anything, then just affect these, change these. And then fall off. This one hopefully isn't complicated to understand. Let me just throw it back on a standard border cube. So roughly like this. Okay, so imagine that this here is half of a brush. Okay, so imagine that this flipped over and this is the same on the other side. What it is the shape of your brush. So you've got fall offs here and different ones that you can use, and obviously whichever one you select, it changes here. So this type of brush, I'm just going to add a few subdivisions for a moment in here. Okay, so if I use this one, we've got a point, right? So everything kind of is coming up to a point. If I use this one, or in fact we'll go to the same height, but this one next to it, then it's more of a blobby sort of. See, so you can see the difference in them, and it's just based on this. So if you know you want something nice and sharp, or you want to, I don't know, dig into something. I don't know why my spacing is so bad. Let me turn it. So we can create a little groove in. So that's just the profile of your brush. Okay. Right, and that covers everything on that. So let's do new scene. No. We'll grab it in the plane. So in order to increase the amount of subdivisions, it's Shift and D, and then it will bump up and give you a new level. And down here in the bottom corner, you'll see here total. So I've got 6,400 polygons in this scene at the moment. Shift D again, and it will jump up here. You can see how many you're on, and it gives you a new level. Every time it will give you a new level. Page up and page down. Sorry, make sure function's on. Just that. There we go. Okay, so page up and page down on your keyboard. So I'm paging up now, and it goes up to 4 and says highest at the top. We're looking here, and then page down. So I've got level 3, level 2, level 1, and you can see the amount of polygons on the actual object as well. So there's a level 0, which is 100 polygons, and then all the way up to what we've got at the minute, which is what we're on, 250, 600 polygons in there. Notice that as I was describing before with your characters, subdivisions work best when your squares are equally sized. And notice that there aren't any triangles in any of the meshes or any of the preview meshes that you get given inside Mudbox. Okay, so that's page up and down in order to increase and decrease. We will move on to... No, I'm not going to do layers just yet. I'm going to talk about the rest of these for a moment. So if we just start, so if we sculpt something, so if we just start doing some details here. So sculpt brush, Open and close brackets makes it bigger and smaller, or you can hold down B on your keyboard and you can increase and decrease. Oh, it works with the tablet, sorry, not with the pen, not with the mouse. That's annoying. So on your tablet, which most of you I'm assuming you're going to use, hold B and then you can click and drag and it'll increase the size of your brush. Holding M for Mike allows you to increase the strength of your brush. Okay. If you're using a mouse, then unfortunately you're stuck with this over here. So you've got the open and close square brackets in order to do size, but strength you're going to have to use this one over here. Holding down Control will allow you to invert the selection. And then holding down Shift smooths. Okay. So where you've got any sort of really horrible, harsh details and you want to smooth them out, you hold down Shift to smooth them out. Okay. Undo and redo are the same as they are in any other program you've ever used, so you don't need to change that. Relax we'll look at, so I'm going to have to try and mess this thing up as much as possible first, but if we, I don't know, let's grab things together. So I'm just trying to really cause problems with it. Let's grab a little bit as well. Okay, cool. Right, look at the state of that. It's horrible, right? So relax will try to even out the spacing between the polygons that you've got on the screen. So you see how some of them are kind of moving upwards towards that big horrible issue that we've got there. And a combination of relax and then smoothing. So we'll grab the smooth tool, which I can hold down Shift for. We'll bring those horrible details back in a little bit. Like that. Okay, so you haven't got quite such a horrible nastiness going on. There is an update on Mudbox, which I'm 99% sure they haven't put on these machines yet. But it allows you to use tessellation, and it's amazing. So I'm going to try and get them to get it on here as soon as we can. It probably won't be on here in time for you guys to do for your characters though, so it's really quite pointless me telling you. If you use Mudbox at home, look for, there's a service pack 2, which will allow you to use tessellation, and I can show you when I've got my laptop back how that works. Okay. Okay, so when you're doing characters, for example, let's grab this head. This is probably the head that you're going to start with. One of the first tools that you want to use is grab. So the basics of any kind of sculpting that you ever do is do all the detail, all the big details first. Don't go straight away doing shifting and optimizing it up to the highest level of polygons and then start drawing eyelashes. You need to make sure that you've got the base model done first. So using things like grab will allow you to really quickly change the sort of shape of your character. We can make sure we've got symmetry on. Before you ever think about, well, now I want to add more details in. It's only when you know for sure that you want to start adding more details in that you can press Shift D and go to the next level. Okay, don't and then work again then. So how much detail can I get out of this level before I go to another level? Okay, now it's probably at that point it's good point to bring in layers. So Mudbox has layers the same way as Photoshop, for example. And each of the layers that you have, you can adjust the strength so that they're visible or not visible. So at the minute, we've got a basic head. We're on level 0. So active level is 0, and the highest level at the moment for us is 0. Okay. If I go Shift D, which adds in some more detail, and I'm going to go, just for showing you guys, I'm going to go to level 3. And then up here, under my Layers tab, I've got Sculpt options and Paint options. Paint we'll come to in a different video. Sculpt, if I press on this little plus button here for a new layer, I can now sculpt on this layer because it's the layer that I'm on. Oops, hold on. Let's go to number 1. So I can sculpt detail on him. That was a bit horrible. Put my strap down. Okay, so if we sculpt some details on him like that, that layer then can be phased in or phased out. So you can imagine the amount of detail that you can add with pores in the skin and all that sort of stuff, and wrinkles and all that kind of thing. Clothing folds if it's a jacket that you're working on. And then you come back to it later on, you go, oh, actually that's really bad, I don't like it, or it's too strong, and then you can reduce it, or you can just get rid of that layer and you haven't affected the rest of your model. It's something that it can get really annoying, because so if I page down now, notice how my layer sculpt layer 1, which is on level 3, is blocked. I can't do anything with it. I have to be on the same level 3, in order to carry on working on that level. That will annoy you, trust me, but you'll see the benefits of it when you're able to kind of hide and show details that you might not want later on. And instead of you modeling like from scratch from here to here, this perfect beautiful looking head, and then you realize, oh, actually I wanted the chin to be not quite so big, you then got to try and grab all of that stuff and move it, which is going to smudge all the detail layers that you put on. But if you've done it all in layers, then you can just get down to the lowest level, move that chin in, and then all the detail layers and everything else above it will all just slot into place. Okay, does that make sense? That's how that works. Okay, so these things here, they're useful for, so for example, pinch. So if we've got these two details that I've just put in like that there, we can grab pinch and it'll pinch those two together. So it will give you sort of more of a fine, you see how it's pinching them. Okay. They're good for clothing folds, good for wrinkles, etc., etc. So these flatten's quite nice. One of the BA students uses flatten for when he's modeling, and it gives that sort of almost Overwatchy sort of style where there's quite sharp little edges in it in places. Really nice tool to use. Foamy is literally like, it's like just adding foam on top. It's a little bubbly type thing. Spray I don't use, repeat I don't use, imprint don't use, wax I don't really use. Knife's quite useful. I'll just put a big slice in. Obviously you bring your strength down a fair amount, and you can just cut into something. So again, for wrinkles, scars, anything like that sort of stuff. Smear I don't use. Bulge and amplify are quite nice. So if you want a certain section of your character to bulge up, you can. Masking and erasing and freezing. So if I know that I want, I don't know, to affect just his nose, right? So I will cover this bit here, turns it blue, and that means I can then go into this area here, and I can grab it and sculpt it and move it, and it affects this tiny bit because it's slightly blue, but it won't affect this stuff over here, so I can't move any of this stuff. Okay. Freeze. Never remember how to delete. I just did it. Wait, I need to remember that though to tell you. It's a combination of buttons I can remember. I think it's Shift U. Okay, Shift and U will delete your freeze. You can right click inside the viewport, which will give you a set of options and menus, or you can right click your character and it will give you a separate set of options and menus. So these allow you to rename things or lock parts of your character or unlock parts of your character, and then these ones allow you to change things like the lighting in the scene, whether to hide the grid that's in there, whether to have the character smooth or faceted. All these kind of things is worth you just kind of messing around and playing about with. It's not sort of, it's like learning Max for the first time. There's going to be loads of things that you don't need to use for a while, and then you'll kind of learn the other bits of it later on down the line. Hi, Josh. So moving on, we'll go to, I'll show you a little trick that you can do in it. So open a new scene. I'm just going to grab a plane. Okay, so first thing is I'm just going to add a few levels of detail in. So what we're at now, 0.5 mil. Oh, 0.5 mil. Yeah. I don't want the grid. It's annoying me. And I don't really need wireframe either at the minute. Okay, so I can look at this. You've got the same view cube that you've got in 3D Studio Max, so I can hit the top, so I can look at it from directly above. And then I'm going to show you how you can use stencils. So stencils they're not like stamps. So stamps will follow your brush, whereas a stencil means you can place something on there, and then you can kind of almost like, remember when you used to be at school and you got a piece of paper and a crayon and you used to rub over a tree and you got an imprint, that, right? So if I chose this brick wall, for example, over here, I've got some telling me how I can move, rotate, and scale the stencil that I've got, or how I can hide it. So Q hides the stencil, and then S allows me to move it around or shrink it. So I'm going to just place it here. Then I'm just going to turn off. I'm going to go back to sculpt. I'm going to turn off mirror. Slightly bigger brush. And then I could sculpt on that detail straight onto my mesh. And it looks like it's inverted to me. Yeah, we need it the other way around. Okay, so if you saw that one there, it was the grouting was sticking out as opposed to the brick was sticking. Okay, so I just flipped here. I've just chose to invert the values of that, and then we'll do it again, and then we can see we've got a brick wall appearing nice and quick. So you can use all of these same tricks and techniques for characters. So if you've got an image of someone's wrinkles or forehead wrinkles or anything like that that you want to use, or even clothing, if you find some alphas as in black and white images for those things, and you can use them to draw in that detail. And whilst we're here, I'll quickly show you paint tools. So paint tools, in order to paint in here, you got a standard paintbrush, which you can choose your color up here, choose whatever color you want, and then buff, off you go, you can start drawing. You've got projection, which is what I'm going to use here, which means that when I click, when you first start using a paint tool of any kind, the first click you do, it'll bring this dialog box up, and that tells you to name the layer, asks you what size you want it to be, how you want to save it, so in terms of TIFF or etc., and then which channel. So notice how you've got diffuse, specular, gloss, incandescence, opacity, etc., etc. They're all on here. So I'm just going to keep it on diffuse, and then using projection, it's basically doing what it says on the tin. So it's going to project. Oh, hold on, that's not doing what it says on the tin. It should be blue. That's strange. Why? That's freaked me out. Well, there's my blue brick wall. No idea why it's blue. Ah, yes, good shout. It's almost on. What have I got rid of? Oh. Okay. Do it again. Okay. We won't invert the values for painting. Okay. So it sounds. I remember when this first came out, and you could do this, and I was like, "Oh my god, that's so cheaty." But really, it's not. So we've got we've got the details. We've got a little bit of bump detail in there, and then we could kick that out as a normal map, and you've made a brick wall. Okay. So all of those same tools, being able to project those details, so you can go and grab an image of a character's or an actual human's face, and use those details to draw on skin, to draw on little moles and this, that, and the other. It's totally up to you how you use it. I'm gonna say one thing to you, and that is, do not change your material presets, and definitely don't change your lighting presets ever. Changing these, they might look like they're going to be really cool, but your model will end up looking nasty. And then trying to get it back to default, just going to default lighting, which is here, doesn't bring you back to default lighting. It never has in Mudbox, and I don't understand why. There is a way of getting it back, so if you do make that horrible mistake, I know how to get it back, but it's a little bit of faff. You have to move the lights manually in order to get them to where they should be. So just don't touch the lighting presets, please. Materials aren't too bad. You can change those ones, but don't change lighting ones. So fall off is for your brushes. Stencils are so you can stencil something straight on. Stamps are the ones that go with your brush. Paint tools we've briefly looked at. Remember that you've got layers as well within paint. So here I've got my paint layer, and I can grab it and I can turn the paint layer on or off, and I can add different levels of paint on top. And then sculpt tools 1 to 9 here. All of your preferences and things for each of the tools over on this side. Mainly you're going to use sculpt, grab, smooth. Okay. All right, we'll stop this one here. Have a play around. Have some fun with it.